All right, so today we're going to talk about troubleshooting access issues for your end users inside Salesforce when you have Docusign Gen installed. This is a list of things that I found either in documentation or through trial and error, so I hope they help. First things first, you should know by the Docusign admin guide that in order to provision access for end users, you manage all of that from the Docusign Gen user management page here. So one thing to note is that when you add new users, let's say, for example, I was going to add the integration user here. You're given a different number of options based on what components of the DocuSign package you have installed. In this example, we just have eSignature and Gen installed. We do not have DocuSign Negotiate installed in this environment. eSignature, again, as the description adds here, is really just for people who are sending documents. So if you do not need to generate a new document and you just need to be able to send something, you can be provisioned just as a user here. This is also where you provision your administrators. If you are using a button, a custom button via a DocuSign Gen template to create a new agreement to send out, then you need to have generator access as well. Also, clicking this button for updating permissions for existing users will search your existing DocuSign instance for users that match that email and make sure that the permissions match up. So this is the first place to check to make sure that the people that you're trying to provision access to have the right capabilities. So I'm going to exit out of that for now. One of the error messages that is commonly displayed when users first try to use DocuSign Gen is, you must have DocuSign user permissions to perform this operation. This will show up anytime you try to click a DocuSign Gen button, custom button that you've created, or use the DocuSign Lightning Web Component for envelope status. This generally indicates that you haven't provisioned the person with the correct permissions. When you perform this action and add a user and grant them e-signature and generator licenses, on their user record, what occurs is they're actually granted permission sets here for DocuSign document generator and DocuSign user. So this is really how those two things are bridged. Another thing I'd recommend checking as you're provisioning users in mass is actually logging into your DocuSign instance. In this example, I am an administrator in here. And what we'll do is we will go over to the Users tab, and we will look to see that the permission profile is not blank and has, at the very least, DocuSign Sender attached to it. This will indicate that that user has the same permissions in both your Salesforce instance and your DocuSign instance. One other thing to check, I'm going to go ahead and log into my test user account here to show you what another error will look like. So I'm logged in now as that test user that I was showing you earlier. And what we're going to go ahead and do here is now that this user has been provisioned with DocuSign Gen capabilities, we're going to refresh this screen and see if the error that I took a screenshot of above here is actually resolved or not. So you'll notice here now that DocuSign status, the Lightning Web Component shows up without issue, and everything is good to go on that front. The next thing we're going to take a look at is the Create Order Form again, which is the custom DocuSign Gen template button that I've created, and see if that functions appropriately. Okay, so this is another common error that'll show up, basically indicating that for that test user, I haven't told DocuSign, I haven't authorized that user, I haven't responded to it yet. But it's a very common error that shows up because once you are provisioned with those permissions, you should have the ability then to authorize yourself, which is a step that every user will have to do the first time that they log in to ensure that they log in with their Salesforce credentials and their Docusign credentials and bridge the gap between those two systems. Okay. After you've authorized your users and made sure that they are set up with the correct permissions, the one last place I'd recommend checking to make sure that everything's ticked and tied is actually inside DocuSign. So as an admin, you can go to the settings page and then scroll down to the left-hand side under Connect. Now, this is where, for those of you that are familiar with Salesforce, your managed packages list kind of exists. So DocuSign Apps Launcher here represents the managed package that is tied to your Salesforce to DocuSign connection. And there is a feature inside here that is a good place to double check if you're still having issues, if your end users are still having issues sending or using Docusign Gen. There's an associated users section down here that is sometimes set to all users and sometimes set to select users. Now, as an admin, you may want to control whose envelopes can sync to Salesforce and whose can't. If you have an org, for example, that has finance or HR professionals inside, you may want to make sure that they are not connect users so that offer letters, for example, don't sync into Salesforce. So if you are leveraging this feature, it's always a good idea to double check that the users that you want to sync are all checked and that you have hit the Save Configuration button here inside Connect Users. We have it set to all, but again, this is just meant to give you as many things to check as possible to make sure that your users have what they need. If you have other situations or access issues that you've experienced in the DocuSign Gen and Salesforce world, please let me know in the comments. I'm always interested to hear what people have found out and how they've solved it. Thanks.